Hello again, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. So, we talk so often about lead gen, Google Analytics, social media, content, leadership strategy. But what's on the mind of many, many people today? Millions and millions, in fact, are where the jobs are and how to get one for tomorrow. With so much now becoming more remote and big agencies breaking up a bit and laying off many, where do all the jobs go outside of Manhattan? I worked in recruiting years ago, and where we are with personal branding and the job market can really be a fascinating study when considering the future workforce. Sasha Martens is the president of Sasha the Mensch, a global talent recruiting agency focused on advertising and marketing positions. And on this episode, we'll discuss recruiting and jobs in the advertising and marketing industry, where he came up with the name of the firm, and some honorable mentions, high unemployment numbers, interviewing at home in your work virtual setup, Vanilla Ice, Gary V, Argentina, Finding Dory Nemo, and a lot more. So let's tune into Recruiting Leader with a leader of sharks who used to be a recruiter on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. All right, Sasha, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. For those that don't know you from the recruiting world, tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, and your career to date.
Yes, Shark, thank you for having me on the show. My name is Sasha Martens, and I run a global recruitment firm that specializes in the advertising field called Sasha the Mensch. I started it about 14 years ago with based in New York, and since have expanded to having a team in the last 10 years in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So I can always take some time to skip winter and spend some time down
Yeah,
there.
no kidding.
And then prior to that, I learned the recruiting and fundamentals from a great firm in Chicago called Chemical Personnel Search, uh, where I had some great mentors there. And but started my career in the music industry as a music promoter in Illinois, working with everybody from luminaries such as Vanilla Ice to Blue Oyster Cult to Foghat, um, you name it. And what I did learn from the music industry, as I always like to say, is disaster is the industry standard. So
Yeah, well, welcome to 2020. So,
yes, exactly. Honestly, much of this is what's going on. I'm like, well, it reminds me of days as a concert promoting. So like, what else could go wrong?
mm.
So
Well, I know that Mensch in Yiddish means a person of integrity and honor, but honestly, I'm obviously curious, where'd you come up with the name for the firm?
yeah, I thought it was. I moved to New York, and I thought it's a word that I've in my previous life as a music promoter, I always wanted a name that has meaning, but also put a smile on your face a little bit. And I thought it was important to say, it's like, yeah, you want to stand for values, and you want to stand for somebody that is looking for the long term in relationships and relationships with people. And that's where I kind of
Yeah.
came up with the idea.
Well, I go by Shark amongst my friends, so I'm going to have to change the name of it to Shark the Noble one, maybe as my next URL for this. So, let's talk about a sad subject, unemployment. It sucks, obviously, in the world that we're in at this time. The recording, we're doing a little bit of a reset, if you will, especially in the economy. We're just north of a depression when you see all the job losses and unemployment rates. But we were at continued record growth going into all of this. So obviously there's some hope at the end of the tunnel. But if someone loses their job today, where should they start in the job search journey? And I mean, especially in the advertising and marketing industry.
Yes, I've. It's the first thing I think to say is that as often has been pointed out, we don't know what's coming next, and it's going to be hard to predict. But what are the steps that people can take? I think first off is to prepare yourself a little bit and organize and get your house in order. I think in the advertising marketing field, making sure you have your in our line of work, it's your portfolio, your books, your work history all lined up. I know this is sort of basic information, but I think the part is
What's a
it's going to
needed
be a rough.
reminder? I mean,
Yeah, it's going to be a rough period. But if you're trying to, and I think this is what everyone is going to have to do, is sort of guess out what are the new horizons going to bring. I think the advertising and marketing field, especially the advertising agencies, are going to go through a tremendous and massive shift. In some ways, this has already been happening. You've seen over the last decade or so what had long been sort of an oligopoly of these holding companies, publicists, IPG, Omnicom, a few other holding companies.
Aegis, Dentsu Aegis.
They're sort of at denso ages,
Yeah,
their power has sort of waned a bit, or their dominance of the industry has waned a bit,
sure.
as other elements have sort of come in from in-house firms to, let's face it, the tech companies have come in and taken quite a bit of business. And what I think maybe is an analogy to what's happened um, in other industries, similar to, let's say, the retail industry, is sort of an acceleration of what was already occurring. And in the case of the advertising world, you're seeing companies like such as WPP merge offices and organizations together. Other ones having massive cutbacks. These things were probably coming, and there's some of these firms that might be the J.C. Penney or the Sears Roebuck of this downturn. Um, so looking positively and optimistically, what we see and what we're seeing is it's sort of going to be new, nimble companies that are going to be um, birthed out of this most likely. And we're starting to see that smaller firms that are able to bring out content quickly, not necessarily cheaply, but quickly, and bring value to clients. And we've seen on a number of situations where some of these companies are doing quite well. A number of the independent agencies are doing well for all things considered, is the
Mhm.
best way to put it.
I know you're not a career coach per se, but obviously you know how to help these people position themselves as well. From a social media stance, what advice would you give candidates today with how they shore up their if you will, their social media? Whether it's LinkedIn, their Instagram profile stuff that shouldn't be out there. I mean, this is still something that I think a lot of people got a little bit lazy in
Yeah.
in feeling maybe too comfortable with what they were posting. And in a time like right now, you've got a real potential, not necessarily to say, I don't want this person because of their social media post. It may just be that you have 49.9 million other people to choose from. And then obviously that's an exaggeration, but it may be that you have multiple candidates to choose from that don't carry some of that baggage. They may be more introverted, but I just think that's an interesting thing I've seen with some people being a little too content or too comfortable on their
Oversharing.
posts. Yeah, too
Yeah,
comfortable in
a
their
little bit of
sharing.
oversharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. Is and it's an area that where when it comes to social media, I think it's the first thing we tell people is each person is going to have choose their what is going to be them and represent them, and sometimes it's worth asking your your friend or colleague is, do you think this is okay, to get that other perspective. And sometimes asking somebody you know is going to give you the answer you may not want to hear, to hear what they think of, hey, what do you think of my profile, what do you think of the information, is there everything up to date, is it accurate, do you foresee anything that could be misconstrued, or and I think that's something that people should take a little bit of time to focus on. What I can say, sort of second to that, is what we're also seeing right now in terms of those that are looking for employment is there's a real need for specific hard skills, and sort of highlighting some of these hard skills, whether you're a specialist in, say, um, if you're, let's say you're a designer, maybe you have a strong background in motion design, there's going to be a need in advertising for people that can provide, are true makers that can take pieces of work from the beginning to the end, and highlighting some of these hard skills that you have, where in the past maybe it may have been sort of a given. It may be valuable to bring these things to attention, because somebody say, hey, we need somebody that is strong, has worked for has a strong understanding of the technical skills of how to make social media work, or how to create content very quickly. They can shoot on their iPhone, they can edit it in ways that is, I'd say, of a higher caliber.
Yeah.
I think these are the type of things that are going to be are going to stick out. And I think what you're seeing even more so is the second piece. The third piece to that is um, earned media. That the as advertising goes, companies are going to be looking again for value and what's going to be cost effective, and earned media with PR firms, social media firms. That's the playground everyone's going to be playing in
Go into
or
that
trying to do
further.
more
What
of.
do you mean by that? Give us some examples of how you mean that.
Well, I'd say if you look at companies where you're looking to sort of exploit creative opportunities, or or get your brand message out there, using what in the past you'd say, hey, we're going to do a big, huge TV commercial, or we're going to launch a large campaign through, standard platforms and channels. Now, companies are turning out content very quickly, and in other situations are trying to use PR or PR stunts, and to as amplification to get more attention for their products. Versus in the past, that sort of had been sort of secondary or tertiary to what most ad agencies or most ad agencies sort of made their money. And now that's sort of much more the focus of where the business is going in general. And it's frankly, it's cheaper and more cost effective in the eyes of many companies and clients.
Yeah, but you're not talking about the candidates themselves having necessarily done that to promote themselves. You mean for content they've produced for brands that
Yes,
advertise. Yeah,
exactly.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's a
yeah,
great
yeah, yeah.
point. Well, and
Um,
to your point about hard skills, I mean, it's a much different conversation having somebody who says they manage the creation of a website versus somebody that can code in SQL or Apache or something like that. It's a much different way of saying the same thing.
yeah, it's you in the field that we work in, where we're working with the companies that the talent that we work often are those that are creating the ideas, concepts, and big brand platforms. It's going to be the ability to mix in certain other aesthetics
Hmm.
that to show um, that you can bring a broader skill set or broader understanding. That's going to have real value. If you look at, in my sense, it was probably the agency that has been most successful, I believe, in the public eyes, outside the greater advertising industry, and I think legitimately so, because the results speak for it. As you look at VaynerMedia and what Gary Vaynerchuk has done over the last 10 years, an individual that was not in the advertising industry, did not come through the traditional agency routes, but essentially created a platform where the work that that company produces is at lower cost. And why do companies go there? Well, he's also created himself as a brand and an influencer. So people are looking for his magic. And so there's two things: they get his magic plus the lower cost. That has become really appealing to a lot of companies.
This is a great conversation, really, about leveraging the best practices, if you will, in marketing and advertising and social media to build your own brand if you're an
Yeah.
entrepreneur.
It, it's interesting, is it's sort of a realization for me. And when you speak on Vayner, the genius is that brands go to Vayner because of Gary.
Yeah.
Gary understood something that many others didn't, which was, I'm going to make myself the superstar, and people want the superstar magic, and that's brilliant. And and not to go on a
Yeah.
tangent, but it was sort of it was an epiphany to me. It was just, I was like, why is this? And it was just really clear that, and I give him this, is that he didn't sit there try to win all these awards, that he didn't
Yep.
care about any of
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
you can't fault him for that at all. I
no,
mean, now he's got
it's
millions of more followers than the people that have won an award.
yeah,
I've done this. I've had this conversation with a lot of brands before because when somebody tells me award-winning agency, the lack of power that means because there's so many awards out there
yeah.
versus somebody like Gary Vee who has millions and millions of followers. People, you're gonna at least consider them for a pitch that you may not before. So I think what he did was pretty brilliant as well. Do you run into any companies? Have you come across where somebody had too many followers? And I ask this because we talk a lot in marketing and advertising about being able to leverage your own employees. And I know somebody who was middle aged who has a fairly large following, 100,000 plus. I'll put it that way. He's at a pretty good stage, but he had gone through a job search not that long ago, and it became somewhat difficult for her because she was worried that she was maybe getting looked down upon for having such a large following when they were checking out her profile. Sometimes that can be too intimidating to brands.
It's interesting. There is what we'll see, and I'd say what I feel most comfortable speaking to is there are times when people are sometimes intimidated by those that are looking at to be hired.
Well, and it may not even be
Maybe,
intimidation. They may be concerned this person's in it for themselves rather than for the brand,
yeah, I
which
think
is,
that's one
and the
of
brand
those.
cares about the brand.
Yes, it's. I think that is that's a really good point. I think sometimes you'll see if it really plays to what the person's work history is, and social media is about the most narcissistic thing you can do in many ways. It's about yourself in many ways, most of the time, and I think it really you have to look at what the work history is of the person and what's been their dedication to the companies they have worked at over a period of time. If somebody, I would say this, and this is sort of a general rule, is if you're 1 year one company, 1 year one company, 1 year one company, that's going to raise some red flags, or should raise some red flags, and say, is this person going to be interested in working on our brand or their brand?
Hmm.
Um, I will say that at points there's a level of intimidation sometimes that this person may know something better than we do, and I've in my 20 years of doing this, I've seen more than my fair share of situations where people have lost out on opportunities because they were frankly better and more qualified than the person that was interviewing them.
So another thing I want to talk about. Earlier, I had read an article you'd published on LinkedIn, an interview from home during the global quarantine. I thought was really interesting, and I kind of want to pivot towards that. So if somebody is looking for a job today, obviously, I mean, we've been doing interviews, via Skype or some other video conferencing tool. Obviously, Zoom is what we're talking about all the time. But especially when you consider Instagram and TikTok and other selfie-ish type platforms like that, with so many people talking about this on a regular basis, how well do you see people using web conferencing platforms like this, Skype or any other Zoom or anything else for interviews? Because it's a different
It's a,
medium where you're taking a picture of yourself and posting it on Instagram or a video on TikTok, or you're interacting face to face with somebody in a professional interview. And as casual as you can be with people you work with, that changes a fair amount to where you're interviewing for a job, in a tough market with somebody you don't know. And it could be intimidating to a lot of people.
it's interesting. What you see is now that more people are comfortable and confident with it, it sort of swings around to bite people at times because, hey, you're at work, you all use the same platform, and you use Zoom as your call platform. You dial in, everybody, it works all the time. That's fine. All of a sudden, you make the assumption, hey, this should be fine. I'm going to dial into Zoom and I'm going to be connecting with this other person. Well, maybe that person is over at another firm, and you have slight differences in technology or slight differences in uses, and you're not using your company's platform. Lo and behold, you can't get the audio to work, you can't get the microphone to, you can't get the microphone to work or the video to work. And I do think it's important where you have to take a few steps back and make it very simple and basic again and say, okay, um, 15 minutes before any sort of interview, mic check, make sure that works. Take some time to make sure the video works. And then I think establish a few ground rules. What are the other people expecting? And there's generally a lot of assumptions made. I've had on a few occasions where recently we've had people that had Zoom meetings scheduled, and they've prepared themselves, they dressed up, only to find out it was only that everyone was calling in on their telephone. There was no camera, and it was a phone Zoom conference call, which wasn't clear from the invite. So I think those are a few things you want to establish: who's going to be on the call, how many people are going to be there, will this be an audio call or a video call? Um, Again, something that you'd think would be very obvious to everybody, but everyone makes the assumption.
Well, run a test. I mean, not everybody's got every app downloaded. And so you've got to set up your profile on Zoom or GoToMeeting and Skype and whatever option. I mean, and it's kind of like with podcasts, you've got to be available on all the channels. I mean, they're going to give you time. You're not setting this up on the fly, but I've known people before who installed Skype 2 seconds before and then didn't figure out how to do everything within 10 seconds because it wasn't one that they were using all the time.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. One of the other sort of pet peeves of mine is the bad microphone. Is there's too often people will use microphones that pick up a lot of ambient noise. I think the Apple podcast, the Apple, I can't remember what they're called,
The pods?
the app, AirPods.
Yeah.
They still, I find that they still pick up a good deal of ambient noise,
You
where
mean
the
like
old-fashioned heads
every fire engine that goes through Manhattan?
bingo.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that's one of these situations where investing in a simple headset that you can plug into your computer, or if you want it wirelessly, fine. Maybe you look like you're working at McDonald's, or you're an air traffic controller. Fine, that's going to be more effective and sound better than having these sort of tinny microphones that you plug into your mobile device. And then you're going to sound,
agreed.
and you're going to pick up all the noise and hear dogs, fire engines, and people in the street. They pick up a ton of ambient noise because the microphone is there to amplify whatever it hears.
Well, you think of it just like what podcasters know, and having been on TV before, this was important because I was on radio, as I was always thinking about the microphone as much or more than I was thinking about the camera. And I laugh all the time when we see people now so often doing remote news stories from home. They never have a quality microphone, and you can listen to really bad microphones. Not, well, say they're using less than great microphones that are basically just plugins into their phone. If you're interviewing, invest in a $20 lapel mic from somewhere on Amazon and get it shipped to your home. It's going to sound so much better and more impressive
Yeah,
to people when they pick up the richness of your voice and less ambient noise from, say, just a broad-based type iPhone mic, which is not a bad mic, but it can make a difference. It's the difference between listening to us talking and what you hear with me with this quality microphone versus just talking into your computer microphone and that picking up way too much noise. It can make a difference even in an interview.
spending the last 20 years of my life on a headset, on a phone. Even now, when I'm out on the street with my cell phone, I still have a headset
Yeah.
mic. I don't care if it looks ridiculous, but
Yeah,
it's
I thought you were about to play Fortnite. I wasn't sure.
yeah, yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I do look like I'm about to play Fortnite walking down the street with these massive
Yeah.
headsets, you know. But thank you, Beats by Dre, for making the big headsets so I don't look as ridiculous, and people momentarily think it's cool
Now it's
until they
cool.
see the
Yeah.
boom mic hanging down, you know, and then like, yeah. But I want the richness of sound. I want to hear people, and I want people to hear me, and not to hear
Yeah.
the fire engine go by.
Agreed. Well, so where do you see the marketing and advertising market going? How are the models going to evolve in your mind, as and what you're talking to the advertising leaders, especially, in the markets that you serve, where we're going to move? So much of this is moving to remote work. Why do you necessarily need to be, in the center of the world anymore in New York to get an advertising job when you can now just remote in from Sheboygan or or Omaha
Yeah.
or wherever it is, if you've got those hard skills, especially that are in need. And we see so many businesses that are they're just going to continue to really struggle for years, probably, with figuring out what's the new normal look like. And I hate using that phrase, but what's the new normal look like when you don't have 10 people jammed into a cubicle, and everybody sharing the same nap pod at a big agency?
I mean, the last 2 months have been one huge experiment into what of everyone having to work on a remote platform. And I think there are some downsides, and people see that. And you can talk about that on the personal professional side, where no, it's hard to break away. And it's not clear when there's on off. But I think one of the downsides that exists is the value of people being able to interact with each other. There is something to be said for offices and interaction and sort of building a company culture, and that's going to be a big issue that's going to come up in the future. Now, that said, this has sort of opened people's eyes to something that they always thought before, like, well, I need to see this person in person to know that they're getting the work done. Well, now that's clear that people are able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
A second result is these places such as San Francisco, New York, where it's incredibly expensive places to live, difficult places to live for many people, and the cost of the as it stands, labor costs are incredibly high. There's going to be opportunities for companies to say, "Hey, we can have a remote team in St. Louis that can work for us. We can have a team in Dallas that's going to work for us," and in specific instances, that can bring value and be an opportunity for companies to perhaps, instead of having to open up offices, lower their costs and and be able to employ people in different locations that will save companies money, which is something that might be really key right now. The flip side of that is for companies that say you're in Omaha or Sheboygan, and in the past you can't find somebody to your talent pool of those that were willing to move to these locations to contribute to your team is much smaller. Well, all of a sudden, maybe now you can hire that person in San Francisco that is amazing. That's not going to move out there, but they'll come out and visit over a period of time, and you can build a relationship with them there as well too. That barrier of entry is probably going to break as well too. So it's not going to all just go one way. It's going to offer opportunities for other people to go and tap in and use resources and talent in different locations. What I've noticed, and this is being discussed, is these sort of virtual agency models. The other piece that hasn't been connected thus far, which I sort of see and is coming, is more what you could almost call the borderless model. Ultimately, everyone is uploading their information to Dropbox or Microsoft Cloud. You know, if what's going to stop you from having a team of creatives be based in Colombia or based in Brazil to work with you on the different projects you have? They're incredibly talented, and they can work remotely just as effectively. And that, I think, is going to sort of open the world. In a time when borders are closing, it may open the walls even more for everyone.
I will just tell all my friends in Brazil, que legal. So, but
Tudo bem.
yeah, tudo bem. One thing I think will be really interesting to see, though, as these borders, especially these technology borders, have been removed, and the idea of being able to connect more easily, if you're in Omaha or Peoria or wherever, with that talent that's in San Francisco, is one of the things I think I find some concern with is that the market in Peoria will not exactly always pay $150,000 to $200,000 for a $75,000 to $100,000 position that they're normally used to paying for. So that's going to be a little bit of a learning curve for people to see where this all shakes out, because the cost of living in New York, if you're that talent that lives in New York or San Francisco and you're overpaying for that 600 square foot closet that you live in, where 600 feet is an actual closet in Peoria, it's a
Yeah.
much different cost of living, and people are not going to just settle for the cheaper prices. So that's going to be different. I think the other thing that I'm really interested in seeing today is where in the future with hiring, because of what's happened, because of this reset with having more people work remote. I've worked remote for a lot of companies for years, is that you're going to start to see a little bit more of a disconnected emotional feel between managers and their employees. And that may mean that we see more layoffs more quickly, because maybe they are going through business challenges. Obviously, that's why a lot of people do it, but there's less connection to make them
Yeah.
have empathy for their employees that they would have gained had sometimes they were able to see them more often. Now, that depends on if you've got an intelligent manager of any kind, and they're going to be able to bond with people and do well and know that they don't have to have them under their thumb to see them every 2 seconds to make that connection. But there are a lot of unskilled managers in the world, so that also is a big part of a challenge.
The success of remote working, and this is what I think a lot of people are going to be interested in seeing, that is 100% dependent upon the person that's overseeing the other people being invested in making that work.
Mm-hmm.
If there's somebody that only can do, be in front of people and only be in a room with somebody, and that's their expectation, it will not succeed.
Yeah.
But if the person is going to take the time and invest the time in the people that are working, let's say they're in New York and the team in Dallas, if they're going to invest the time and interconnect with them, communicate with them, make sure that they feel as much as part of the team as possible, maybe bring them up to New York when the time comes, um, that's going to make for more of a successful outcome, in sort of my opinion. And that's what it's going to depend upon. I think there's going to be a rush for a lot of companies to say, hey, we can save on real estate and cut down on our footprint, but companies lose culture and
Exactly.
innovation if people are not together. I've had for 10 years, I've had people and worked with people um, that are on the other side of the world from me, down in Latin
Mhm.
America, um, and it's worked and we've been effective. But I think everyone will tell you we're more effective when we are together. But there's a long-term investment that you make, and so that looked as a it's looked as a long-term play. So while we're not together every day for years on end, we have been together for almost a decade.
Yeah, agreed. So, real quick question then. I saw a friend of mine post a position, a high level position on LinkedIn, and I thought, when I saw it, he's president of a company, and I know he's going to get flooded with resumes and candidates. With so many people being out of work today, what's the value of bringing in a resource like yours as opposed to just finding them on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I mean, there are a lot of really talented people out there, and there's a lot of really talented people out there looking for work. I would like to say this: people. I take umbrage when people make this statement saying, "Oh, companies are going to cut the fat and lay people off, and the mediocre are going to get laid off." That offends me because these people weren't mediocre 2 months ago when they were making money for your company. So there are a lot of really talented people who are going to be applying on LinkedIn and looking for work. What I think our firm and what we do is it's a specialization, and what we look for is um, we're going to come and solve a specific business problem for you. There may be maybe you have 50 positions you're looking for, but if you're looking for a specific management position, we want to know your culture, what the context of the role is, and what the nuances are to find the right person and make it an efficient process for you as possible for a
Yeah.
successful outcome.
Well, Sasha, I ask this of all my guests: what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
I'm glad you asked. Whale shark, you
Whale
know.
shark.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
A very
Big,
nice.
slow.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
You watch too much Finding Nemo, I think so, or
I,
Finding
I,
Dory,
I,
whichever one had it more.
I dove I learned to
Oh,
dive in Honduras,
yeah,
and then the other ones I have to say I do love the hammerhead as well. I once swam with a school of
yeah.
hammerhead, which was pretty cool.
Oh,
So
where were you at the time?
the
Galapagos? Yeah,
Galapagos.
it's
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful. It's
yeah,
life changing.
yeah.
Well, Sasha, it's that special time of my show. Are you ready for the five most interesting, important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Number one, you spent a lot of time in Argentina, so this one should be easy for you. Or you spend some time in Argentina, so this should be easy
Yeah.
for you. Diego Maradona or Lionel Messi?
Oh, Maradona. Messi's a great human being, but Maradona is God. So
There
it's,
you
I
go.
mean,
All
it's,
right. Number two, you're located in the heart of Manhattan, Empire State Building or One World Trade Center.
um, uh, you know what? I'll say this is top of the rock, better view of
There
all
you go.
three.
All right, not bad. Number three, better jobs to recruit for as far as quality jobs. Jobs in marketing or jobs in advertising?
I have to say jobs in advertising. That's generally I feel that's my comfort
It's a very
zone.
safe
So,
answer. Very safe answer. All right, number four, LinkedIn or Indeed?
oh, LinkedIn,
Yeah.
hands down.
Yeah.
Definitely like
None of the
LinkedIn.
job boards are that exciting anymore.
No, I'd say and LinkedIn is my favorite social media platform because it's kind of boring. It's like
Yeah,
it's there for a specific reason, you know.
exactly.
So,
Exactly. Number five, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
you know, I have to say that there's a two. I have to give an answer. I agree with it. Like if depending on the gravy, if it's a lot of gravy, I like the biscuits. But otherwise, I'm going cornbread.
Good
You know.
man. So, Sasha, where can people find out more about you, what you guys offer on a recruiting and consulting and employment basis, and ways to keep up with you and more?
Yes, you can find and track me down and my firm down at sashathemensch.com. That's SASHATHEMENCH.com. And I'm Sasha Martens on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most posting and writing most of the time.
Awesome. Sasha, thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's
Shark.
Perspective.
Shark, thank you so much. Enjoy the good Memphis barbecue for me.
So that was my conversation with Sasha Martens, the president of Sasha the Mensch, a global talent and recruiting agency focused on advertising and marketing positions. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, it's funny to think about the old days with just resumes, but think about how you highlight those hard skills, not just on your resume, but in your social media post, personal website, LinkedIn profile, etc. It's very easy to post fluffy soft skills all the time, but eventually companies want to know that you actually know how to do something. Great idea people are great, but sometimes you just want to see who can actually technically execute a great idea. Don't leave that out of the you packaging. And look for earned media and value. That's what a lot of employers are looking for if you're building that following. Think of the PR value of how you can help amplify a brand. Gary Vee, as we talked about, is an amazing example, and it's a great way that entrepreneurs have to look at personal branding for themselves moving forward. Second, as someone who's already worked from home for years in a remote capacity, I couldn't be more excited to see where we are with this and where we'll move forward. Hopefully companies in New York and San Francisco, for example, will realize that there are a lot of people out there with newer ideas that don't just come from everyone switching jerseys at various ad agencies. And yes, people can sometimes work better sitting together, but many of us jump on planes every week and connect with those same teams. Who wants to pay $5,000 a month anymore to live in a closet near Midtown when I can get beachfront property for less? As Sasha said, what's going on with the agencies was an acceleration now, but when you add in COVID-19, big firms merging, and they're seeing newer, nimble firms hire employees inside New York and out. I really do encourage, though, all employers to consider better ways of connecting remotely with their employees. There is nothing worse than working for an insecure, inept tool who doesn't know how to manage anything but local. I've worked for one before. It's a disservice to the brand that invested in those employees, and the managers need to do more now that we're becoming more remote-ish. Third, really think about your home setup now in the world we're in today when trying to find a position. Don't let it be a barrier for entry, if you will. A lot of people are comfortable on Zoom and Skype interviews, but not that many are great at it. And I think a lot about this with virtual presentations as a speaker. I'll give you an example. If you watch the local news during the pandemic, then you saw a lot of newscasters at home with lesser microphones. Basically, they were using like iPhone headsets and AirPods. The quality was so-so at best. You can get a pretty affordable microphone, and the sound of your voice can create a much more impressive customer experience, if you will, for the recruiter. That doesn't mean you have to sound like you have radio voice. It's just one more thing that makes you look adept, savvy, and even more comfortable than the next person. Again, remember the main focus of this particular episode being business, marketing, and advertising. So packaging really matters, and every little bit helps, even as a candidate. And download and test every platform you can, whether it be Zoom, Skype, Hangouts, Teams, whatever. Don't let pesky plugins ruin a good opportunity. And then with all of that, think about the remote work questions you'll get asked more often now. I was telling a friend recently to think through it as an example, how she worked and performed, if not just well, but even better when working at home. The newer normal may need you to work from home, so think about how you can demonstrate that you're succeeding with this, with connecting with your other internal employees, and really moving forward in your capabilities. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. I hope that you're all safe and well and employed. And join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.